have a registered participant from Philippines. So thank you very much to all of you to be connected and for your interest in this webinar. Just some practicalities of this webinar. I hope they can hear me. Yes, as I mentioned, we will use the chat function to collect your feedback and your comments and your questions. So please activate your chat functions and also the participants, because in that way you will be able to see the list of the participants that are connected to the webinar. So I will ask you please to raise your comment and your questions through the whole webinar, along all the webinar, and so at the end we have a question and answer sessions, and we can comment and reply to your feedback from our side and the presenters. You have received a briefing paper with some very concise information on the webinars, and you also have received the agenda. You can see in the screen the agenda of the webinar. So very briefly, we have structured the webinar in three main blocks, and then the question and answer sessions. The first block is this one. It's a welcome and introduction of for the webinar by myself. I'm José Ramón Picatoste, working at the European Environment Agency. Then we have a second block on the Climate Adapt Urban Adaptation Support Tool with two presentations. One from Lea Kleinen-Kunen from the Competence of Mayor Office to introduce the tool, the Urban Adaptation Support Tool. And then we will have a second presentation from Joao Diniz from the Cascades Municipality to showcase how this tool can be used at a local level, and specifically in the development of the Cascade Adaptation Action. Then we will move to the third block, and is focused on another element of the Climate Adapt platform, the Urban Adaptation Map Viewer. And here we have unexpected circumstances, that our colleague Alexandra Kazmierczak is sick and is unable to participate today in this webinar. So we have found a solution, and also Lea will be showcase this element of the Climate Adapt. Lea, as well as working for the Competence of Mayor Office, is also a member of the European Topic Center on Climate Change Adaptation, and this center is supporting EEA work on all the urban and social aspects, including this component of Climate Adapt. So this presentation will be done also by Lea. And then we will have this question and answer session. Very briefly, as an introduction for the contents of this webinar, you know that urban areas in Europe are impacted by climate change according to their geographical location and their specific vulnerabilities. So the changing climate affects many aspects of the urban living, including provision of essential services such as, for example, transport, water, energy, housing, healthcare, social services, and so on. So the local level has a key role in planning and implementing adaptation actions. The European Adaptation Platform, Climate Adapt, the aim of the platform is to support Europe in adapting to climate change, helping users at all governance levels, including the local, to access and share relevant data and information to support the development of adaptation strategies and actions. So Climate Adapt is an integral part of the EU adaptation strategy as the one-stop shop for climate change adaptation information, and it is mentioned that in the Action 5 of the adaptation strategy, European adaptation strategy. Early this year, we deployed a renovated platform with a slightly reformulated structure and a new layout and some new elements. Focusing on the urban content of the platforms, the urban elements, beside these two elements we are going to present during this webinar, beside the Urban Adaptation Support Tool and the Urban Adaptation Map Viewer, the platform includes additional data and information relevant for the urban adaptation. So we have a specific urban web page with information on different aspects of the urban adaptation actions. Namely, we have information on the policy framework, for example, the urban agenda for the European Union. We have information on main activities, including, of course, the Conference of Mayors for Climate and Energy. We have information on the knowledge base, and also on funding opportunities. And beside this, let's say, descriptive information in Climate Adapt, we have a database that contains a lot of items that are dealing with urban climate change adaptation, including some dozens of publication reports, research projects, and other items. And I would like to highlight two specific kinds of items that are the case study and the adaptation options, because they are specifically developed by us, by the ETC, by the European Topic Center and the European Environment Agency, to illustrate examples of how Europe is implementing adaptation actions. So regarding the urban sectors, we have 46 case studies in Climate Adapt, and we have 20 adaptation options that are dealing with the urban and local level. So, having said this, I would invite Lea. Can you transfer the role?
Yes.
Lea to provide us with this first introduction to the Urban Adaptation Support Tool. Lea, we are going to transfer you the role.
Okay. Can you see my screen already?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. And you can hear me properly?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So, thank you. And I'll start. Yeah, thank you, José Ramón, for the introduction and for explaining my little complicated role in this webinar today. My name is Lea Kleinkun. I work for the Covenant of Mayors Office and for the European Topic Center on Climate Change Adaptation. And so this first presentation I will give in my role as member of the Covenant of Mayors Office. And I'm very happy that the European Environment Agency invited the Covenant of Mayors Office to actually present the Urban Adaptation Support Tool, because it's actually the result of a very close collaboration between the EEA and the Covenant Office. So as José Ramón said, I will give a general introduction to the tool, and then João from Cascais will complement with a more practical presentation of how they used it in the development of their adaptation plan in Cascais, which hopefully will be very useful for you. Just to start, I think most of you know the Covenant of Mayors pretty well. For those who don't, just as a reminder, so the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, it's a movement of cities that started in Europe but is now spreading across the globe. And cities who are taking action on climate change to secure a better future for their citizens. They're supported in this by the European Commission, And at the moment there's more than 8,800 cities in the EU, but also in the wider European area, so the EEA countries and the Eastern Partnership countries that are part of the Covenant. And out of those, more than 2,200 are committed to working on adaptation to climate change. But this number is rising steadily. So you can see, cities in the Covenant work on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, so mitigating climate change, but also adapting to climate change. And this is since 2015, so it's not that novel anymore, let's say. So the Covenant covers almost half the EU population and is mostly composed of small and medium cities. And so when adaptation became a part of the Covenant of Mayors, and even before with the Mayors Adapt initiatives, it became pretty clear that adaptation was still a relatively new topic for a lot of European cities, and that there was not so much guidance out there, and if it was pretty scattered. So we heard from José that there's more than 1,000, a lot of items in the Climate Adapt database on urban adaptation, but it was not really well structured. So the Covenant of Mayors Office has been working together with the European European Environment Agency and Topic Center on adaptation to develop this urban adaptation support tool. And it was modeled on a pretty similar tool for member states, but so this one's adapted to the local level. And as you can see, it takes you through all the steps necessary to develop, implement, and monitor a local adaptation plan that's also compliant with the requirements of the Covenant of Mayors. It provides a structure, but users can pick and choose which steps they would like to learn more about. And it can be used as a starting point to understand better the different steps, and then further information and examples. I worked on a revision for most of last year, and so the revised version was released in January 2019 on Climate Adapt. And so just to recap what the tool is, as I said, it's been jointly developed. It's the main adaptation tool for the European Common Community. It's based on basically the questions and the issues that the Covenant cities have raised, and also the feedback by signatory cities. So it has been tested and improved. And for the latest revision, a lot of suggestions have also been taken into account. And then it contains a lot of references to valuable guide materials, tools, reports and case studies to go.
Excuse me, Leah. Could you hear me?
This is what it looks like concretely. So, as I said, so there's you can see the different steps on the left side, 6 different steps, and then they are divided into different sub steps. And whenever you click on a step, it lights up in green. There's a self-check also at the end of every bigger step, if you want to really go through every step to develop your adaptation plan, just to give you an idea of, just to make sure that you've done everything, let's say. And at the beginning of every sub-step, you get a short introduction, and which also helps you to decide if you want to read more or if you just want to go with it.
Talk with her.
Like this. And
no, you are close now. Open.
You don't see my presentation?
Yes. Yeah, now.
Now we do.
Now.
Now you do? Okay, great.
Now it works, yes.
Okay, great. So
Yes, you are not red.
So you can see. So on the read more,
Yeah.
you can see the full text. So the text contains general information, tips and tricks, and also, as you can see, links to related sub-steps. Everything is somehow linked. At the end of each sub-step, you have the list of links to go further or more in depth. So you have a lot of reports, then a lot of guidance and tools. These are mostly developed by European funded research projects. Then there's websites, web links to the projects themselves to go even further, and then case studies from Climate Adapt, the ones that Jose Ramon mentioned before, and so to see also the practical application of these sub-steps, for example. And you can also see on the slide the symbol of the covenant, which indicates that this information is of particular relevance to covenant signatories. So, for example, here it indicates how the information in this step supports the covenant signatories to fill in a specific part of the reporting template. And here it indicates that the information from the covenant office can be helpful also to complete the step, like further case studies. And then there's two particularly interesting sections that I wanted to highlight. So first is in this step 3.2 is finding examples of good adaptation practices. You will see on this page that there's a lot of links to adaptation practices compiled by the Covenant, and then below you can do a search by climate impact and by sector to find relevant case studies for climate adapt. So if you know which impacts you would like more examples on, this is where you can find it. Can add value, I think, is the examples of adaptation action plans. So we have compiled a list of some plans, like some of them are already a little older, some are newer, and it's for every country there's at least one or two plans, often in language, to try some inspirational plans, exactly, for example, in your country or on climate impacts that can be interesting for you. This is a very quick overview of the tool. I also wanted to highlight that you can, of course, access it from Climate Adapt, but also from Covenant Mayor's website.
Okay, thank you very much, Lea.
The slides are not changing.
Yeah, we have some technical problems.
Can you see it now?
The connection is very slow, so
Can you see the slide?
You are mute.
We now see the slide adaptation resources on top.
Yes. Okay, great. Thanks. I hope it's... You see the one with the Covenant of Mayors logo on top?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the left upper corner, there is
Yes.
the logo. Yeah.
No. This is Castillo.
Okay, I'm sorry. There must have been a mix-up. I saw them on my screen, but they didn't move properly. I'm sorry about that, but I think we will send you the slides. You will be able to see them afterwards. I'm sorry about that. As I was saying, so you can access the slides. You can access the adaptation support tool also from the Covenant of Mayors website. If you happen to be there, it's under the adaptation resources page, and there's more information about webinars, for example. Do you see the what's next slide now?
No, not yet.
Okay, I hope it's coming. Basically what I want to say is that what's next for the urban adaptation support tool. So you will randomly update it roughly every 6 months to include also new guidance materials that has come out, add additional information. And if you have anything that you think could be valuable to be added to this tool, please let us know. I can give you the contact details afterwards. So especially if you work on European research projects and you're developing guidance and tools that you think is useful for a wider city community in Europe, that's very welcome. And for the discussion later, it would be also really interesting for us to know how you are using the tool, if you're using it, and what would be useful for you. So any feedback and suggestions are very welcome, and I'm very happy to answer any questions. And I'm sorry again about the technical glitch. Thank you very much.
We are using the slides.
Let's see. Thank you very much, Lea, for your presentation. I'm very sorry for these technical problems because we feel it's the connection speed that doesn't allow the synchronization of your voice with the slides we see. But anyway, as you mentioned, we will share the slides with all the participants. And now let's move to the next presentation by Joao Diniz. Joao, we are going to try to transfer you the role of presenters. That try to put your presentation in presentation mode, full screen.
It's already there. I would like to know if you can hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I have already my presentation on full mode. So and sharing the screen. So let me know if you see it or not.
Okay, perfect.
We do see full mode.
Yeah, okay. So, great. So because I'm talking on my cell phone, I'm using the cell phone app, so it might sometimes not work properly. And if somebody calls me, I have to turn off the call and resume with the presentation. That's the down part of using the cell phone. But at least you can hear me well. And I would like to start by thanking to the organization, to Lee, and say hello to a few of my Portuguese colleagues who I know very well. And I'm really happy to share our experience here. So, allow me to continue and share you a bit of what Cascais is. We are nearly 100 square kilometers of municipality. We have 30 kilometers of coastal line, so with 17 beaches, but also 1/3 of our land is protected landscape. So it's a mountain range of Sintra Cascais, and this provides with a unique set of landscape that is very useful and very renowned for tourism all over the world. So, and that also gives us what we call unrivaled heritage, both on cultural and natural items. Oops. So, next slide. So, what are we facing with climate impacts? I'd like to know, can you see my presentation now as well? Is it going well? Okay, so we first assessed in 2009 our climate vulnerability, so 10 years from now. And we immediately started to see that we had a lot of visible impacts. And in one of those photos, actually the bottom middle photo, is the photo of the beach that was, well, once a beach, and it's called Abano Beach. And every year, it started to lose a bit of sand, but then with the dynamic of the coastline, and so on. But for the last 3 to 4 years, it's mostly pebbles, no sand at all. So the Environmental Portuguese Agency removed the classification as a beach. And this was the very first big visible impact that we had on climate change, which is something that you can go there, watch it with your own eyes, and touch it and feel the impact that it does. So this changed a lot. Obviously, our climate impacts and our vulnerabilities are related to the decrease of average precipitation. So we'll lose about 1/3 of our precipitation. We will have an increase of the average yearly temperature, but an increase of the overall summer heat waves, which is obviously a health hazard and a safety problem. Like I mentioned, we are a coastline, so we will face not only sea level rise, but a rotation on the waves of the ocean. And those models tells us that we will have less sediments being deposited. So this will favor transportation of sand, but not the deposit, which is an additional issue that we face. And lastly, we will face an increase of extreme precipitation events. So extreme weather events and storm surges, which are also a safety hazard for our home. And we assessed all these in those 6 sectors that we chose from the IPCC model at the time, and we have recently changed, and I'll tell you why very shortly. Wait, I think I changed. Yeah, okay, so now you have the timeline. Can you see the timeline well?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this is the timeline, and what I want to show you here is that since 2009 until 2017, we started with the strategic plan, where we made a thorough assessment of what's going on related to climate change here in Cascais at local level. It was one of the first in Portugal. And we immediately, after we got that document, we knew exactly where we had to act for adaptation purposes. So we started to get some opportunities, mainly from the EU, mainly from European funded projects, mainly as BASE adaptation. We had Klima Adapt Local, a project funded by the EA grants, the Thermos and the INOAT, funded by the Horizon 2020 and also by the EA grant. And we used all existing platforms that we had to learn a bit more about what should we do, the opportunities that we had to get, but also during the monitoring process to make sure that we were going on the right path. However, this is taking an issue through opportunities. So if we know what we have to act, and if we know what we have to do exactly, well, all we have to do is define a plan. But at the time, we didn't have a plan of action. And that gave us a way, or paved the way, for, let's say, a framework based on funding opportunities that we had. And we went well. I mean, it's not a problem that we had to go according to the opportunities that we got, but mainly there was no structured framework that we got. And that was obviously an issue for ourselves. These are just some of the pictures and some of the items that we've done during this process. We engage our own colleagues in training sessions. We talk to the citizens and make sure that they engage in our initiatives to create more awareness and so on. We talk with our colleagues from the Civil Protection Department. We worked with infrastructures, but all in a dialogue that was basically mentioning that this is going to happen, climate change. These are the impacts that your sector will face, and we're here to help. And that was our approach. Okay. Thus coming the Urban Adaptation Support Tool. So, remember, we tackled the challenge through opportunities, but we needed a more structured framework of action. So the Urban Adaptation Support Tool helped us immensely with this. It provided guidance to develop the Adaptation Action Plan that I mentioned in 2017. It furthered our knowledge on adaptation, so mainly these work frames, these structured work frames that I mentioned, but also through the different classifications and terminologies for this process. This way we were speaking the same language, we were using the same concepts. That was very useful for us. And together with these financed projects that I've mentioned, we had a participatory approach and stakeholder engagement. This meaning that we were not doing this in a cabinet. This was not just a small team of people doing this. We engaged a lot of participants. We asked them, what are their fears? What would they like to know? How can they help? And we engaged them during this process. And finally, the Urban Adaptation Support Tool was quite useful for the monitoring process, because defining KPIs from the start, I would say it's fairly easy. But to make sure that these KPIs are adjusted to our own reality, that's a different challenge. So we got a lot of ideas from the Urban Adaptation Support Tool, mainly ideas for KPIs according to different contexts. So what did we get? We get our Adaptation Action Plan, and this is actually the first in Portugal. At the time, it was the only one for, I would say, 2 years, but I'm very happy to know that other municipalities in Portugal are furthering the development of these plans, and they are actually building up on them. So providing more information, more accurate information, more structured information, and I would say probably more workable information. So the novelty on this is that for the first time, we had a plan that went well over the political terms. In fact, this was defined until 2030, so it's supposed to go through 3 political terms. We have made updated climate scenarios according to the IPCC 5 model, and they actually tell us that, yes, the 10 years ago, the scenarios were telling that something is going to happen, and now we tell you that they were right, but the severity will even be worse. So unfortunately, yeah, that's another problem that we will face in the future. Like I mentioned previously, we worked together with a lot of other institutions and a lot of different people. This was actually with the base adaptation project funded by the FP7 participatory model, where we defined together with 150 staff members the potential for the action and the priorities for action. And we integrated it with the Sustainable Development Goals. Remember, the 13 goal, which is the climate action, defines on its first point, 13.1, that we should develop an action strategy or an action plan to make sure that we are able to tackle this problem as a whole, as a society. And finally, this was submitted in 2017 to the town hall meeting, and it was approved by everyone, so making this a mandatory commitment. And here are the priorities of action. Okay, so we have 13 measures, and they are, I would say, roughly they are general. Okay, so for example, you have to create stakeholder awareness. That's generally speaking, but for each one of these different measures, you have a set of very concrete, tangible actions that you have to implement. And I would say that this is not very expensive. It costs around 11 million euros. So I would say it's 1 million euros per year. And but luckily we've been having some great results, and I'll tell you why. I would say that most of these actions are non-structural or green solutions. What does this mean? Non-structural means that it's about qualification, it's about awareness, it's about providing information to citizens so they can act, or providing information to our stakeholders so they can even further their actions on adaptation. And green solutions are mainly nature-based solutions. And why is that? Because in the 20th century, what we did was we fought the nature in our cities. It was a win of cities over nature. And now, in the 21st century, regarding this subject of climate change, we have to bring nature back into the city, and nature will help us to tackle this challenge. So I would say that green solutions are only, in our case, for water supply infrastructure. Obviously, there are other cities in a different context where these apply differently. I would say, for example, in Holland, where they have the sea level rise, they need infrastructures, green infrastructures, to tackle this problem. Obviously, our geography is fairly different. And finally, all of these actually have a very transversal answer to the climate, to the SDGs, like you can see here. So you have these set of SDGs that our action plan actually replies to or contributes to. And another different thing that we have in our work framework is that we changed our sectors. So like I mentioned, we had 6 sectors in 2009 that were related to the impacts of climate change in Cascais. Those 6 now are 5 sectors, and they relate more to the action organization. For example, we have a team, or we have a set of stakeholders that are responsible for implementing awareness and education actions. We have another one for water resources. We have another one for civil protection and health. And we have ecological infrastructure and resilient urban green spaces, and finally, spatial planning, which is our main challenge. Here on the pictures, you can see just a few of our examples. On stakeholder awareness on the top, on water monitoring, we have placed our own meteorological network at the local scale and provided data for free to anyone that would like to consult. So this data is registered in a table of information every half hour, so you can have long data series and study this wherever you are in the world. We've made the Greenway qualification, as you can see in the middle picture. We have defined and changed quite a lot our politics regarding urban green spaces, because here in Portugal we love lawns and we love beautiful plants. They drink a lot of water, drinkable water, so we have to change a bit of the way we plan our city. And finally, a bit more like I mentioned more work on our training for stakeholders, engaging stakeholders, and infrastructures. So comes the monitoring. Are we doing well or not? So I think we are doing fairly well, I would say. Remember, we used a few of the KPIs that I'm not mentioning here, but I'll use the KPI, which is the overall implementation percentage. So 48% of our actions, plus 9, are already implemented. 48% being continuous implementation. That means that is, for example, providing a service. For example, our College of Civil Protection have to ensure that they have, how should I say this, the action plan for fire hazard implemented and vigilance on the land through May until late October, which we are until now. And if they have this, they have to do it every year. So this is a continuous implementation. Whether 9% is just one single action. For example, like I mentioned, the qualification of our green corridor. It's done. It's completed, fully completed. There's, like I said, there's some numbers that I'd like to mention, which is the 13,000 citizens engaged, 5,000 volunteers. We have a conclusion on the water elevation stations made by our water company, which was considered and changed as a priority according to our plan. This was a very expensive investment, and we have over 600 professionals trained during this process. And finally, the adaptation, the lessons learned. I would like to share with you that our process is a highly replicable one. And this is important because we use a lot of other information. Like I said, the urban adaptation tool. We had with the Klima Adapt local project, the UK ACID model, which is fairly similar. And I would say that this is very easy to replicate in any given city in Europe or even in the world. We consider also that non-structural actions create, a momentum for action because people are engaged. They feel that they can do a difference, and they actually support a lot of these issues. They never question our science, our models. They just want to be there and help because they see that they are of benefit for the process. Most of the actions that I mentioned are nature-based solutions in our specific case. So this is something that is very interesting for us. Cities, how shall I say this? Planning instruments and strategic instruments are of two different kinds. And once you do something on even action plan like our own or strategic assessment like our own, you have to make sure that you provide regulation. So this goes into the spatial planning and urbanism process. This is also very important to make sure that what you do is law-abiding. And finally, all of these transformations that I've mentioned, all these actions, provide a transformative spirit of innovation in the city. This is to change the way that we plan our city. This is to change the way that we engage with our citizens. This is what we can do to make sure that we have an updated model for our cities that reply to the climate change challenges. So it's a very transversal challenge. It's going to happen sooner or later, but like I say here in Cascais, sooner was yesterday and today it's later, so we're already taking it this way. And so there's no time to waste. So I would like to thank you for this opportunity once more, and please let me know if you have any questions so I can do the best I can to reply to you.
Thank you very much, João, for your very interesting presentation. We are very happy to see that the Urban Adaptation Support Tool is useful and is useful for the cities, and we also would like to receive some feedback and proposals to improve the tool with your experience. Before moving to the next presentation, I will invite all participants to raise questions and comments using the chat functions, and after all, we can address all these comments and feedbacks. So please, next presentation by Lea is on the Urban Adaptation Map Viewer. Lea, let's try to share your screen and see if the connection is fast enough to follow your presentation. Otherwise, we can think to present, to share our screens and try to follow you with the description of the tool. Okay.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. So if there's any problem, please say it. Don't write it because I don't see the screen of the meeting now, basically. So yeah. So if there's any problem, any glitch, just shout out, and I will try to find a solution. Thank you. Yes. So the Urban Map Viewer. I'll try to present it relatively quickly so that we have still some time for questions and suggestions. So the Urban Adaptation Map Viewer is also on Climate Adapt, so it's under the Knowledge tab, and it's with the Urban Adaptation Support tool under the Tools. So the Urban Adaptation Map Viewer is here. Do you see my mouse moving?
Yeah, perfectly. We do.
Thank you. So it's a visual tool that aims to provide an overview of the climate hazards that European cities are facing at the moment and with climate projections, and also the city's exposure and vulnerability to these hazards, adaptation activities that the cities are taking. And also it provides some more detailed information for cities that are included in the Eurostat Urban Audit, so the city statistics by Eurostat. So it's a visual tool, as I said, so it's actually best to use it in full screen mode by clicking on this little button at the lower right corner. I hope it has loaded now. Can you still see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So this should be a little better. So it's a tool has a pretty simple structure. It's divided into 10 tabs up here. And so there's an additional page listing the datasets used, but I will explain that a little bit later. So the first 6 thematic tabs correspond to climate change hazards, so high temperatures, different types of flooding, water scarcity, and wildfires. And just as an example, we're going to look at the heat tab. So these all have a pretty similar structure. So on the left, we can see a brief description of kind of what the problem is, why it's particularly important for cities, and how cities can adapt. And then at the bottom, you see some useful resources, reports, indicators, and also the corresponding steps in the Urban Adaptation Support tool down here at the left corner. So the essence of the tool are the maps. They open automatically with a layer displaying a climate hazard. So in this case, it's extreme heat waves. You can see the legend here. And also an example of a vulnerability layer. And so in this case, it's the percentage of lone pensioner households consisting of one older person who lives on their own, because we know by experience that these are vulnerable to heat waves. So by displaying these 2 layers, we can already have a first indication to see where problems could overlap. So if we zoom in,
the call is scheduled till 11. We can
make the system crash. You can see, for example, that in Bulgaria we have a concentration of in some cities of Bulgaria, concentration of a lot of waves and also a high percentage of lone pensioner households. So if you click on one of the triangles, you see which city it is. In this case, the city of Plovdiv, and the actual percentage of lone pensioner households. And if you click on the arrow up here, you see more information. So country Bulgaria, and then the actual number for the extreme heat waves. So these are the predefined layers that open first. If you click on this layer list icon, you see further layers. So, for example, number of combined summer days, which not surprisingly is more prevalent in the south of Europe. But also we can see the percentage of green spaces in the urban morphological zone. That's an example of green solutions as well, so that can mitigate extreme temperatures. We can see, for example, if we zoom into Italy, we have cities with a pretty high percentage of green space in the urban morphological zone. Like here, it's around 60% in Varese. So this is the first layer. So again, here you can see the layers, and if you click on the list icon, you see the legend. Then if we move, for example, to field study, which can be also dangerous for cities because you have like a high concentration of precipitation with a high percentage of sealed surfaces can make the sewage system overflow. And so the basic layers here is a percentage of areas within a morphological zone, so the actual area of the city, the morphological area of the city, and then the observed in precipitation in winter. So if you zoom in, you can see that even though, for example, for the east of Germany and the west of Poland, for some cities, even though the precipitation is decreasing, the percentage of impervious surfaces is still pretty high, so which can indicate a problem. Then I would like to show you also the social vulnerability tab, where the summarize Eurostat data that can be used to approximate the vulnerability of the population to different climate hazards. So the layers. So we have, for example, the percentage of older people, of young children, low and pensioner households as seen before, but also issues relating to socioeconomic status, like unemployment or education, which can impact if people can afford insurance, for example, or their level of awareness of potential hazards. So you can also click through this layer list. And then I'd like to move to the tab of the adaptation activities of cities. This shows if cities have an adaptation plan and also their participation in different initiatives. Like, for example, on this map, you can see signatories to the Covenant of Mayors in blue, and urban orbit cities with an adaptation plan. There's also more layers like participation in international initiatives like the 100 Resilient Cities or the Make Cities Resilient campaign. So this map is not a living map, let's say. It's updated every 6 months or so. The city is part of the Covenant, for example, but doesn't appear there yet. It will very soon. So there's also a possibility to show the cities that participate in European EU research projects like the LIFE program, for example. Last tab, the city fact sheets. They're a bit different. They don't show a European overview, but focus on individual cities of the more or less 900 cities of the urban audit. So you have 4 sections. It's the observed and projected hazards that the city is facing, then the land cover and exposure factors, the vulnerability and adaptation activities. And so it's the example of Pamplona in Spain. You can see for certain hazards they range average than in the European average, like for cooling degree days and for fire danger. Then they have a more or less average percentage of green space. you can see the sea surfaces in the city area are increasing slightly. And there's also some exposure to river flooding and to forest fires. And here in the bottom left, you can see the economic data, and this the vulnerability to EU-funded research projects is basically the outcomes based on the outcomes of some recent projects that show the vulnerability, but it also identify certain characteristics that the city shares with other cities. According to the RESIN project, the city belongs to the group of the southern lands, which is Mediterranean cities and towns with certain characteristics. So this can help to see which cities have comparable conditions. So it's meant to also spark exchange between cities if some of them are, for example, a little more advanced than others. And you can see here on the bottom right that according to our data, Pamplona has not been engaging in adaptation activities at the European level, but that doesn't mean that on the ground nothing is happening. So just one last thing is in the About, click down here, you can see the information about the underlying data sets. So you can click on them and get some more information about sources and descriptions, and you can also open it in GIS applications. So thank you very much for listening to my second presentation as well. And again, very interested to know how people are using this data and how we can make it more useful for you. So the feedback is very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting overview of this powerful tool for urban climate change adaptation. I feel you present the potentialities of the options to support cities in developing their own adaptation strategies and actions. And okay. I'm going to put in the screen the questions for the discussions. And
You have to share the screen.
Okay. Well, we have more or less few minutes for some discussions and questions from your side. Our possible topics for discussions are, first of all, if the urban tools presented in this webinar are useful for you, for what purposes, or examples of uses as we have seen in the Cascade case. Also, we would like to hear from you your views on further development of the urban adaptation tools in Climate Adapt. What will be needed for your actions to improving these tools? And then to reflect something on how can you contribute to disseminate the Climate Adapt urban tools. I have seen some comments in the chat from Julien Ojaus, and I also I received yesterday an email from him with some information on activities they have developed, the Walloon municipalities, to disseminate and to promote the use of the urban adaptation support tool. So thank you very much, Julian, for this information. You comment that you have promoted a tool to local spatial planning advisors and to local energy and environment advisors in some workshop organized in the framework of the Covenants of Mayors. So this is a good news for us. Thank you very much.
There are some.
Yeah, there are some questions in the chat, also from Julian. Can you scroll down?
Sorry, it's just because it's not appearing. Okay.
Yeah, maybe I can quickly respond to the question from Julia and also from Tom.
Yes, please.
So Julia is asking where does the information come from for the city fact sheets, whether the Covenant of Mayors, and if not, if it's in reflection. So the information from the city fact sheets comes from, like, it's a gathering, basically a big compilation of the data of that you can see in this About app. So it's from Eurostat, from EEA data, Copernicus data, JRC data. Not yet from the Covenant Office, and that's actually, I think, it's an interesting idea, and I think we should think about that. Thanks a lot, Julia, for the suggestion. And for Ton, yes, definitely. I think it's best that you actually contact Alexandra from the EEA. She's much more. She knows much more about the map fuel than me, and I can send you her contact details.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I don't see any additional question in the chat. Climate Lab has an inbox, email box that you can raise all your comments and feedback on this webinar or any other issue you can raise. So we will be very happy to answer you and to try to clarify. As I mentioned, our intention is to further develop all the elements of the platform. So always we are very happy to discuss on new needs and on new proposals you can provide us. So again, thank you very much to all of you for your interest, for your participations. We are thinking to organize next year a couple of new webinars. If you are interested in some specific topics, please also tell us, because we are open to orient the webinars to your interest. There is some question here. Okay, I don't know who is comment this to have a close connection with the work from GRC in this work. In fact, we are working with the GRC to connect their work with ours, specifically with the Disaster Risk Management Knowledge Center. We are connecting with them in order to in some way connect both platforms, Climate Adapt and this GRC platform or system. So thank you very much again for this suggestion, and just to again thank you to all of you for your participation.